Hi, my name is Catherine Rogers-Casarez, and I am going to quickly explain the lesson plan I created. I named it the Metamorphosis La Mariposa, which is a butterfly. As a butterfly goes through a metamorphosis and changes, so does this lesson plan. This was created for comprehensive health services. And let me go ahead and explain. The lesson plan, The Metamorphosis La Mariposa by Francisco Jimenez, will begin with a book as the anchor text. And the anchor text is La Mariposa by Francisco Jimenez. The dates of the lesson will be approximately 3 to 4 weeks. So I put the dates of this week as it would be 3 to 4 weeks. The lesson is focused on a second and third grade reading and writing. I went ahead and put down the state standards that would be focused on during the lesson. For week 1, there will be 4 standards that are focused on, including reading comprehension, literary text, theme, and genre. Reading comprehension of literary text fiction, reading comprehension of literary text sensory language, and what they're expected to do. For week 2, I also put down the state standards, reading comprehension of informational text, culture, and history, where they will analyze and make inferences and draw conclusions. Reading comprehension of informational text, expository texts, where they also make inferences and draw conclusions based on expository texts, which are articles. They will identify parts of the text and make their own conclusions. On week 3, they will engage in the writing process, although they are going to start a little bit earlier, but they're going to engage in the writing process full force, and they will use the elements of the writing process, including planning, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing, to compose their own personal narrative, just like the story that they will be reading. The standards included in all weeks is figure 19, which is a very important standard that is found throughout the states. And it's what critical readers are required to do to be self-directed, establish a purpose for reading, to ask literal questions of the text, monitor, adjust comprehension, make inferences using the text, provide textual evidence, retell important events and stories in logical order, make connections to their own experiences, and also to be able to discuss using textual evidence. So then I went ahead and I added the content objectives. What objectives will be focused on for each week, and you can see them there. I went ahead and added the language objectives for English language learners. There are language objectives, and they are speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And I went ahead and wrote down what speaking objectives would be utilized during weeks 1, 2, and 3, what listening objectives would be utilized during weeks 1, 2, and 3. And many of these objectives utilize PSYOP strategies, which are it's a sheltered instruction and observation protocol for English language learners. So I went ahead and included that. I included the reading objectives and the writing objectives, also utilizing strategies for English language learners. The key vocabulary terms are also placed on the lesson plan, and what materials will be needed for the 3 weeks. I also included the PSYOP strategies, which again is Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. And these are all the features that should be utilized in instruction for English language learners. They do not all have to be utilized, but in my lesson they are. So I went ahead and went through a lesson sequence. I only created one for week 1, and this is what it'll look like. So building the background, the book that will be our anchor text is called La Mariposa. It is by Francisco Jimenez. He was also an immigrant who came to the United States, to California, and that's what his book is about. His book is about a student in the first grade, and he doesn't understand the English language, and he sees a caterpillar in his classroom, and he starts to think about, the caterpillar metamorphosizing and changing into the butterfly. And in the story, he imagines himself flying over the fields that his father works in California. So it's culturally relevant to the student, and they can also identify with the reading. So the motivation is building the background. Right here is who is Francisco Jimenez, and this will be written on the board with big letters, with a big colorful question mark. So the students probably do not know who that is, and the teacher will then show a picture of the author and ask students once more, who is Francisco Jimenez, and do you know him? And they would point to the students, do you know him? Do you know him? What about you? And so on. Then they would introduce the students to the author. And in my lesson plan, whenever you see a blue piece, you can press on it and it'll take you to the website, so that teachers could utilize the website to then tell the students a bit about the author. So going back, then they would talk about the author. They would show the video meeting the author. There is a video that the teacher would then go to meet the author and play this for students, and so on.
From a Mexican background, and I grew up in a...
So after that, then they would go into the book. This is a presentation and practice application of the lesson. And what I went through is before the reading. What would you do before the reading? Well, the students, if you go back and look up the objectives, it tells you exactly what needs to be done by the week. So before reading, they're going to explain that every story has a beginning, middle, and end. And the reason being is so that the author can fully describe their experience. So they would use a graphic organizer, and the teacher would have it for students. This is one example of a graphic organizer. And here's a story map for La Mariposa, beginning, middle, and end, that the kids could use. But this is the main story map that I would like teachers to utilize for the story during the week. The beginning, the climax is really the middle and the end, and the teacher would explain this. And then they have to explain that there is a problem in stories and a solution. And that would be further explained in the lesson. So then they would explain that the story has many parts to capture the entirety of the experience. And I gave some other kind of resources on how to explain. So day 1, the teacher would go over the front cover and ask questions so that students could predict what they think the story might be about. There would be a few readings of the book, not just one. So the teacher would read the book with emotion for the first read and then ask questions like, what did you think of the book and why? What did you notice about the illustrations? What did you notice about the language? Was it descriptive? Could you see, hear, taste, touch, feel based on the words in the books? So then the second read during the same day, the teacher would utilize the Let's Connect strategy, which is also a PSYOP strategy used for ELL students. But it's just a good teaching practice for any student. But anyhow, they'd go on during the second read, and they're going to focus on the E and the T, and the E stands for engage and the T stands for think. So let me go back to what the L is. It's listen, engage, think, and then say something. So while the teacher is reading, they're going to be engaging the students for the second read. So the first time they heard the story, the second time they're going to really engage in it. And what they're going to do is they're going to have index cards, and the teacher will pass out an index card to students, and there will be a question on that index card. And when prompted, the student will answer the question orally to the class during the story reading. And then at the end of the second story, students will be given a time to trade their index card and talk with their partner and discuss. So it adds for further academic discussion. So that'll be day 1 and 2, because that might take a little longer. Day 3, they're going to have a mini lesson. They're going to go over the story map. They're going to go over the vocabulary. What is each element of a story map? Excuse me. I did provide vocabulary visual cards that the teacher could utilize, and they can also create here their own vocabulary card. They can also use the Freyer model for vocabulary, and research shows that the Freyer model is the best model to use for learning vocabulary terms. So I included that. So it goes on, and students will learn about the story map, and they will go ahead and the teacher will read the story once more, a third read, and the teacher will have a chart paper with the story map drawn on it. And during the reading of the third read, the teacher will model the story map process and explain each process out loud while he or she is filling in the map. And students can then help the teacher answer the parts of the story and what she should be writing in the map. And after the third read, and after that has been done, students will get into groups and create their own story map and fill in the story map as a group. And they can also include symbolic illustrations to describe their reasoning, just to add that enrichment piece. Day 4, the teacher's going to act as a facilitator, because they're going to complete their story map, discuss their reasoning with their peers, and then they're going to go ahead and present their story map to the class, explaining why. And then the teacher's going to probe and inquire, well, what is the beginning of the story? Why is it important? They're going to go back to these probing questions so that students know the important parts of the story. And then they're going to tweet about their thoughts. So I added the template, and I added a few templates here. But they can tweet about their thoughts in regards to, let me show you which one I'd like them to do right here. Tweeting their lesson, on their thoughts on the lesson for the day. So day 5, they're going to go into theme and why it's so important in the story and what theme is. I also put down that the teacher will introduce theme, but they're also going to have a visual anchor chart like so to tell us what theme is and why it's important to know and where it comes from. I also provided videos that would be useful. So they would have access to that video. There's also a video on how to find theme. And the teacher would play the video for students. Then the teacher's going to facilitate the process. Actually, I missed a part. So then they're going to practice theme. I created a Google Classroom theme lesson. So let me open that up. So here's a Google Classroom that I created. And there is a section on a theme. let me get to that. So here's the classwork. Here's theme.